Hi, I'm Dr. Heather Hartel, a collegiate professor for Humanities, Philosophy, and English at the University of Maryland Global College. I am also the advisor of the English and Humanities Club, which is now called the Applied Humanities Club. In this presentation, I want to discuss a framework for working towards the applied humanities at UMGC. When we typically think of humanities studies, we usually consider activities like analyzing literature, discussing historical aspects of culture, contextualizing ideas, making philosophical arguments, learning about religions, and exploring different cultural traditions. Here's a word cloud using readings from the first week of our Introduction to Humanities course, Humanities 100, which can give a sense of the traditional humanities through some pretty interesting word combinations here. We've got creative, time, we've got common and experience together on there, we've got thinking and skills on there, understanding, knowledge, critical, different perspectives, humanistic inquiry, scholars, and interdisciplinary. As you can see, traditional humanities studies entails a wide spectrum of topics and thinking about these topics. Here's another way of thinking about traditional humanities studies on a form of a list of some of the kinds of topical areas that are covered. We might do things like analyze shared heritage, consider diverse perspectives, engage in interdisciplinary exploration, identify universal themes, cultivate aesthetic sensitivities, refine ethical reasoning, contemplate universal themes, contemplate artistic expressions, appreciate shared narratives, foster creative performances, and engage in cross-cultural connections. So how do we transition from the traditional humanities approach, which would involve things like analyzing literature with critical theory, to an applied humanities approach, which would equip individuals with practical job skills and tangible abilities that are applicable in the real world? So here's how I would propose conceptualizing this. Here I have a Venn diagram that represents what I see as the three main overlapping areas that emerge from the traditional humanities that can become applied humanities. In this diagram, I've taken the various elements of traditional humanities from the previous slide and matched them to three key umbrella skills that dominate the humanities. The first area is critical thinking, which would include things like ethical reasoning, cultural analysis, cognitive flexibility. The second area focuses on creativity, which would be things like artistic expression, aesthetic sensitivity, knowing universal themes, and storytelling. And then we have a third area, which emphasizes empathy, and this would incorporate things like cross-cultural connections, diverse perspectives, global awareness, cultural identity, and open-mindedness. In this next slide, I have some definitions for each of these three areas. Critical thinking refers to the rigorous analysis and interpretation of human experiences as expressed in philosophy, religion, the arts, and this approach is the more traditional humanities one, but it does have real-world applications, allowing people to establish connections between theoretical understandings of the human condition and practical scenarios. The second area, empathy, involves exploration of diverse perspectives, experiences, and emotions through an appreciation of human-created things like art, literature, cultural myths from global cultures. By engaging with these works, individuals can develop empathy for those who are different from them and gain a deeper understanding and appreciation of their experiences. And then we have creativity, which involves engaging with the imaginative and creative aspects of human life, like stories and artwork, performance, and cultural traditions. While individuals can be creative on their own, it's also important to study and draw inspiration from the creative endeavors of people throughout history. This allows for exploration of new solutions, different kinds of approaches to real-world situations. So to summarize, the applied humanities develops and directs the traditional humanities in strategic ways to spotlight their instrumental role in building practical skills for the workplace. Essentially, we are looking to take a further step than theoretical exploration and into practical application. It might be really fun and intellectually stimulating to ponder things like Muslim calligraphy, Ubuntu philosophy, modernist American literature, but it can be really challenging to figure out what the relevance of doing all of that has for one's professional endeavors and workplace skills. So we want to try and move theory into practice, move the talking heads aspect into practical application. What I do want to make very clear here, though, is that you can't get to the practical application without moving through some of the intellectual aspects first, though. The idea here is that you don't dwell on and exist only in the theoretical and intellectual realm, as the traditional humanities can do. You go further. In this next slide, I have a specific example of how this can work that focuses on one of the course outcomes from a more traditional humanities class, specifically our Myth and Culture class, Humanities 351. On the left, you see the outcome, and the outcome is to analyze myths to identify implicit values and norms that shape cultural, individual, and national identity. And on the right, I have the three main areas of applied humanities skills: critical thinking, empathy, and creativity, and some specific examples. When it comes to critical thinking, when you learn the myths or the underlying narrative of many different cultures, the lens with which you look at the world becomes multifaceted. This understanding can facilitate things like more nuanced decision making. It can encourage people to identify and question prevailing assumptions, because myths often do that, or myths have embedded assumptions within them. You can better appreciate complexity as well. We often think of myths as very simple, but when you study them, you learn that they're actually very complex because of all the connections that they have to cultural systems and to personal and national and peoplehood identity. Analyzing myths also fosters empathy as we gain insight into the cultural narratives that shape others' perspectives and values. This understanding can become really valuable when working with diverse teams. It can help us better motivate and communicate with our colleagues who may not come from the same backgrounds. Also, this empathy can aid in things like conflict resolution, and it can help one craft messages that can resonate with diverse audiences. If you think about how rhetoric works, knowing your audience and your audience's worldviews is important information to help you communicate more effectively. Lastly, myths can offer a springboard for creativity, and that's one of the things students love about them. By delving into imaginative stories and themes that cut across different cultures, our own imaginations can get fired up. We can draw inspiration from cultural myths and repurpose their elements and then apply them to generate new ideas and unconventional approaches. The exploration of myths can also enhance our writing abilities in providing us with a background in what makes a good or compelling narrative that expresses specific values and norms. In these next few slides, I will delve into examples of specific targeted skills that are related to various job roles in these three categories of critical thinking, empathy, and creativity. And some of them are going to overlap and show the interconnectedness of these three areas. And the examples I have here are by no means exhaustive. They are just a sample of the possibilities. So under applied critical thinking, when you engage in thorough analysis and evaluation of the ways complex ideas and concepts are expressed in the arts, in philosophies, in religions, you can gain critical thinking skills that can be pretty valuable in various contexts. One of these contexts might be conflict resolution, where you can use reasoning skills and philosophical and ethical frameworks to find common ground and resolve disputes. You can better foster collaboration with diverse teams by having an understanding of different cultural perspectives within that team. If you look at something like technology ethics, we again can see where philosophical and ethical discussions can be a guide to the responsible development of new technologies. And finally, here we can have marketing insights that can be gained by effectively analyzing diverse expressions of human cultures. That analysis can provide a nuanced understanding of consumer perspectives that can be used to help tailor marketing strategies aimed at specific groups of people. And here we have applied empathy skills, and empathy skills are very highly valuable for so many jobs. Under storytelling and media, these would be our social media managers, for instance. By using certain storytelling techniques learned from studying literature and myth, for instance, one can tap into things like universal human ideas, emotions, and themes that transcend cultural boundaries, and then create narratives that resonate with pretty broad audiences. In medical care, understanding the stories of patients who are unwell or those who come from diverse cultural backgrounds and are navigating the American healthcare system, which can be pretty different from their own, this can help enable healthcare workers to develop a sense of compassion towards those who are struggling, and it can allow for customization of care for individuals. If we look at something like inclusive design, gaining insights into the experiences of the disabled through stories and first-hand accounts that depict their challenges in navigating the world, this can help in creating more inclusive design when developing products and services. Applied empathy skills are also very useful in an educational environment, especially when dealing with students of diverse backgrounds. Familiarity with their backgrounds enables educators to better connect and communicate with them, and it also can help in lesson planning. Finally, if we look at the last of our three areas, we have applied creativity skills. Creativity skills can aid in making things like interactive learning experiences. You can learn what a compelling narrative progression is from studying the humanities. You can learn about things like color theory and the color wheel and color matching. And this can help create appealing visuals and make the learning process more engaging and relatable. There are things like ethical branding, which can appeal to socially conscious consumers, and you can't quite do that well unless you're incorporating philosophical and cultural insights within a specific historical context, and that's something you learn to do through the humanities. And then we have something called narrative medicine on here, and that involves the use of storytelling techniques to allow medical professionals to effectively communicate with patients by explaining their illnesses or prognoses in comprehensible and compassionate manners. You can better know how to tell a good, effective narrative to establish a connection with the patient if you know other stories. One of the things we do in the humanities, for instance, is in a poetry writing class, we have students memorize poems in order to get their minds used to the poetic flow and figurative language, and then that helps you write your own poems better. If you read stories, you get into the mindset of where you can tell better stories. Then there is therapeutic storytelling, and this also includes art and music therapy. The arts provide a really valuable avenue for healing processes of trauma, and this can allow therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers to help individuals navigate emotional challenges with the aid of storytelling. I would argue that professionals are ill-equipped to help others in this way unless they've practiced it themselves or they've analyzed how mental health issues appear in the arts. So very basically, applied humanities equals explicitly moving from theory into practice. We have to articulate very clearly some of the kinds of skills that students will gain from studying the humanities for their work life. So I hope this presentation has provided a bit clearer picture of how it's possible to reposition the study of the humanities to focus more on practical skills instead of on the intellectual and theoretical realm. Thank you so much for listening, and please do not hesitate to get in touch with me if you are interested in discussing this further.